So globally, what we have seen is that a lot of countries have progressively moved to adopt a more broad-based indirect tax system called the GST, and Malaysia itself has considered this and adopted it.
So ideally, we need a balance of tax on effort, which is your income tax, and the tax on consumption. Right now, it's highly skewed towards the income side of it. So what we need now is to increase the tax on consumption. Of course, the SSD, what we've seen here is relatively narrow in terms of its ability to raise more revenue. And also, it's a single tier. What we want is actually to tax on the value that added, so it's more efficient. So the VAT is what we are recommending to the government, that it will actually help to not just to enhance fiscal position, but so importantly, create a more efficient tax system and a more balanced and equitable tax system.
This is one of the most popular tax globally. All European countries, they have VAT. All OECD countries, with the exception of the US, but all OECD countries, they have value-add tax.
Of course, there are some regressive part of consumption tax, but that can be addressed. That can be addressed to cash transfers, to zero rating some of the goods and services. So that should not be a problem to hinder Malaysia's adoption of the value-added tax.
Bila ada tax ni, kerajaan pun boleh ambil sikit lah untuk bayari program-program yang kerajaan plan ni lah, untuk bantuan sosial lah orang kata kan.
This is a challenge not just Malaysia is facing, most other countries, and worse still for countries that are dependent on fuel imports, energy imports. For Malaysia, we are slightly better off in the sense that we do produce our own oil, we are an exporter. So in that sense, the government is able to subsidize part of the so-called oil price shocks that we have experienced. But what's important to note here is that the subsidy has ballooned to a level that is, first, is not sustainable, second, is inefficient, and third, is a misallocation of resources. So the question now is, the price shock has been absorbed entirely by the government to the tune that last year it spent more than 60 billion. That's 2/3 of the fiscal deficit, about 90 to 100 billion, you see. And this year is projected to rise to close to 80 billion. What we are paying on the street here is that you are paying only 50% of what will be the actual world market price. That burden is borne by the government.
One model that I've been, quite interested in is you don't need to subsidize every time. So you create a reference level. Let's say wanted to keep when oil price $80. If it's above, we subsidize. If it's lower, we tax. So you create a mechanism, not necessarily that you always subsidize, but most if the petroleum that level, we tax. And that tax, you can put it in kind of insurance model that keep it for a rainy day. So many European countries tax. And why is that? Because they wanted to reduce the consumption of gasoline in favor of alternative public transportation. But to do the fair system, maybe gradual, and inject the investment maybe in public transportation, especially in the last mile, and make sure that it requires also like shift in mentality, honestly.
Kalau dikurangkan subsidi, sebenarnya memang terasa sangatlah kami ni. Tapi kalau dia dapat membantulah, boleh disalurkan kebantuan-bantuan yang sedia ada yang dan bakal adalah, insyaAllah lah, tak setujulah.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I would like to invite Yang Berbahagia Tan Sri Zarina Anwar, Chairman of the Board of Directors of University Malaya, to deliver the welcoming remarks.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan salam sejahtera. Yang amat berhormat Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim, Prime Minister of Malaysia. Yang berhormat Datuk Amizan bin Muhammad Ali, Minister in the Prime Minister's Department, Sabah, Sarawak Affairs and Special Duties, cum Acting Minister of Domestic Trade and Cost of Living. Yang berhormat Tuan Stephen Sim Chi Kiong, Deputy Minister of Finance 2. Yang berhormat Puan Aiman Atirah Sabu, Deputy Minister of Women, Family and Community Development. Yang berbahagia Datuk Seri Abdul Razak Jaafar, Secretary General, Higher Education Ministry. Yang berbahagia Tan Sri Ahmad Badri bin Muhammad Zahir, Chairman, Employees Provident Fund, Yang Berbahagia Datuk Seri Amir Hamzah Azizan, Chief Executive Officer, Employees Provident Fund, Excellencies, Secretary Generals of Ministries and Senior Government Officers, Chairman and Chief Executives of Malaysian and international organizations, media partners, distinguished guests, speakers, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great honor to welcome all of you to today's symposium, The Path Towards Greater Prosperity for Malaysia, an important milestone in the work of the Social Wellbeing Research Centre, University Malaya. Thank you Yang Amat Berhormat Datuk Seri and all our honoured guests for taking time from your busy schedule to join us this morning. The Social Wellbeing Research Centre, University Malaya, is a multidisciplinary research centre focused on research on social protection, ageing, and social well-being. Our mission is to provide evidence-based policy recommendations and consultations to promote economic development and social cohesion. Ladies and gentlemen, as our nation continues to chart its way towards economic prosperity, the challenge of finding the equilibrium between economic advancement and equitable wealth distribution must be addressed. This is in line with the government's aspirations of balancing economic growth and equality to the rakyat. Malaysia's older population is growing. The number of those aged over 60, which stood at 3.6 million in 2020, is projected to increase to 12.3 million in 2060. According to the Department of Statistics, amongst the households headed by older people, 42% are in a state of relative poverty, whilst 7% are in absolute poverty. Additionally, 40% of the labour force is not protected under any form of retirement benefit. Malaysia's pension coverage at 20% is way below global average of 68%. Older Malaysians simply do not have enough savings to support themselves during retirement. At the same time, existing social assistance programs are fragmented, leading to overlapping and causing both inclusion and exclusion errors. It is imperative, therefore, that we explore solutions towards an integrated and inclusive system of social protection, adopting a holistic approach towards well-being in line with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals aimed at ensuring healthy lives, preventing needless suffering, and promoting the well-being of all at all ages. It is well established that countries which have improved living conditions broadly have developed comprehensive social protection schemes. There is therefore a need for us to look at strategies and options for establishing sustainable social assistance programs and consolidating the current fragmented social protection arrangements into a more coherent and effective system that will contribute to overall growth and shared prosperity whilst ensuring fiscal sustainability. Ladies and gentlemen, today's symposium aims to do just that, initiating discussions and investigating ways to improve our social protection framework and the financing of social protection benefits, particularly through a more effective tax system and rationalization of subsidies. Renowned local and international social protection experts have been invited to share the latest trends and the experience of other countries in implementing a comprehensive and inclusive social protection system for the well-being of the people. It is my sincere hope that this symposium will offer a platform for robust discussions on these critical issues in pursuit of our shared objectives of sustainability and prosperity for all, leaving no one behind. On that note, I wish everyone a productive symposium and eagerly await the outcome of your deliberations. Yang amat berhormat Datuk Seri, thank you very much again for being with us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Yang Berbahagia Tan Sri Zarina, for your welcoming remarks. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to the key highlight of today's symposium. It is indeed a great privilege for me to invite our esteemed Prime Minister, Yang Amat Berhormat Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim, to deliver his opening remarks to officiate the symposium on the path towards greater prosperity in Malaysia. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Yang Amat Berhormat Prime Minister of Malaysia on stage.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan salam sejahtera. Alhamdulillah nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulil karim. Menteri Datuk Amizan, Tim Jamalah Menteri, Tan Sri Zarina, pengurusi lembaga dan ahli-ahli lembaga, pimpinan universiti, rakan-rakan saya muliakan. Simposium hari ini saya rasa bertepatan kerana ia memberikan suatu suntikan satu bidang yang perlu dihadam oleh perancang ekonomi negara. Sementara kita agak tegas dalam menjana pertumbuhan yang sangat diperlukan bagi negara, kita tidak boleh nafikan bahawa membangunkan negara maknanya membangun dan menjamin kesejahteraan rakyat. Sebab itu dia tidak terikat dengan angka dan data yang memukau, tetapi apakah kesan keselesaan itu dirasakan. Sebab itu dalam agenda madani dan berikutnya ekonomi madani, soal keselesaan, soal ihsan, soal amanah, itu kita tekankan. Kerana bagi saya, dalam merencanakan bukan bermula hanya dengan paksi pertumbuhan ekonomi, tapi paksi kesejahteraan rakyat. So let me begin by expressing my profound thanks and appreciation to the University of Malaya for undertaking this initiative. To encourage public discourse on issues that affect the welfare of the nation, economic policies, social policies, as an integral part of a national Madani policy. I want to share, after viewing the short presentation and listening to Tan Sri Zarina, let me say, the focus is not taxation. I've always held the view that taxation should be a secondary issue in any reasonable public policy, economic policy initiative. The first priority must be of governance. This is not necessarily a new, innovative idea. From the days of Abraham ibn Khaldun to Wang Anshe, the new Confucianist in China, always asserted that we must begin the issue of governance, whether we can ensure that there is no unnecessary leakages, absconding of public wealth, corruption, because you can correct these excesses, then you can relate whether there is that necessity to tax further. Because taxation is something that is essential only if it is deemed to be so critical. So discussion whether VAT or GST, it is relevant, but don't ever forget the fact that this country has inherited, frankly, a major problem of governance, of endemic corruption, which is even systemic. You know the figures about debt, deficit, which we have to grapple with, not because the economy has lost its capacity to grow or the fundamentals are considered to be weak, but because the way we govern. And we tolerate this. When I say we, is not only confined to politicians, academicians, scholars, corporate leaders, who in many was a complicit to the excesses and the crime. And therefore, I sincerely welcome this sort of engagement, even to the extent of being critical of government policies or the recent budget or the Prime Minister. It doesn't matter. But what's important is we are focused on the idea of improving the issue of governance. Now it's 10 months. I've been looking at the decisions of the past. I'm not here to just rebuke and use this forum to just criticize the past, because we have also to monitor the present. But name me one reasonable tender or privatization that's considered to be transparent and orderly. No. Losses are by the billions. I wouldn't be specific here. The latest is, of course, the airline fiasco. The questions you raise: what is the source of the funds? Why was approval being given? Issue of governance must take precedence. Then we talk about whether the government shows enough concern and care. I wouldn't deny the fact that Malaysia is quite exceptional in this, as all governments in the past do give major consideration to the welfare of the urban poor to an extent, the rural poor, rural heartland. You can see, in comparison to most developing economies, the infrastructure is relatively much better, but the leakages are horrendous. Now, subsidies has amounted to, with the present exchange rate, 81 billion ringgit. Now, the issue is not taxation. The issue is, of course, rationalization of subsidies. If you can reduce subsidy by, say, 20 billion or 15 billion in the next 1 or 2 years, then we should consider how much tax is required to prepare the economy, to sustain the economy. Now, we have tried to introduce, for example, electricity. We subsidize the very rich. You know, some MPs are saying Anwar is anti-rich. No, I'm not anti-rich. I want people to get rich so that I can tax more. And there's no reason why it should be anti-business. The issue is we are subsidizing the rich. Electricity subsidy. Electricity subsidy. Okay. We have decided to stop subsidy or for the very rich. So there's a decision taken early this year. And without affecting 90% of the population, the top 10%, using 50% of the subsidy, or close to 50%. How much can we save? 4.6 billion ringgit from electricity subsidy. So it's a faulty, fraudulent manner in deciding, in the name of helping the poor and the rakyat, it benefits the few. Now, of course the rakyat benefit, so they're all happy. And the moment we talk about subsidy rationalization, they get worried. And of course, desperate politicians will use this. That, you know, in this Madani government, they have decided to withdraw the subsidy. We do not withdraw the subsidy. How much did we save? Let's say around 4 billion. Tabung Haji. You realize that Tabung Haji is a policy to subsidize every Hujjaj, person who's going to Hajj. You can be a millionaire, billionaire. The policy is to subsidize. So I say, if you can afford to go to Hajj, by all means, go. But don't expect the government to subsidize. Tabung Haji will facilitate the arrangements, make it easy for you. And come back with mabruran wa sa'i mashkuran wa tijaratan lan tabur. Khalas. But don't expect the government to subsidize. The government will continue to subsidize, if need be, for the poor Hujjaj, the farmers, civil servants, whatever, who wants to go, including professors. But we don't need to subsidize the rich. So this policy has at least reduced the problem. So I think, and now we are considering, I was discussing with Amizan, first we have this tax on sugar products, on these sweet drinks, etc. We made very clear. Okay? Number one, it's not a necessity, except this sort of PICC and some five-star hotels. Secondly, whatever is accrued from that will not take it to the treasury, will allocate purely for medical, diabetic, and treatment of sugar-related diseases. Fair. So we are considering something small. Now, what if such policies like the recent measures, what if they say would impact the poor in a way? I would try, at least in this first few years, until the threshold is higher, not to impose unnecessary difficulty to the poor. Now, if, assuming that we find evidence that is impacting adversely the livelihood of the poor, then we can increase the suntikan STR, Rahmah, directly. Instead of giving this blanket subsidy that benefit everyone, including those who are not qualified to receive the subsidy. We are considering, for example, petroleum subsidy rationalization, which is certainly not tenable, the amount of subsidy. Of course, I've been criticized, this is because of my speeches in 2008. People like me, my speeches in the 70s are being quoted. I was in New York many years ago, then one of the audience asked me a question, said, in 1972, I can't recall what I said in 1972, you are an Islamic firebrand, you wanted to do this and that. And I said, thank you very much. You seem to take me very seriously even when I was 16. So anyway, in 2008, I did say that the price of petroleum at that time was high because the price of petrol in oil-producing countries are substantially lower than that of Malaysia. In Saudi Arabia, it was 50 cents at that time. That was 2008, when keadilan, DAP, and PAS in Pakatan Rakyat. Now, the price of petrol in Saudi is 285, and ours about 205. And we are the lowest in the region, and the amount of subsidy is huge. So, okay, I have to, of course, be pragmatic and revise these views. But I think based on available data and the present challenges, to continue to provide subsidy petrol is untenable. We provide subsidy for everyone, the richest in the country and the poorest. Of course, the poorest will not have cars, so they get barely minimum or hardly anything. And including 3.5 million foreigners and huge smuggling across the border because the price of petroleum in neighboring countries are much higher. So we have a problem. How do we then deal with it? Do we need, therefore, to reduce subsidy? Yes. But will that be an impact to the rakyat generally? Yes. Now, how do we redeem that? I think, again, for now, we're thinking of some sort of increase, a possible slight, small increase through this STR Rahmah, so that the Rakyat will realize that yes, there is amount given to them in lieu of the slight increase in the price of petroleum. But these are issues that I think you can provide an input, but what is important is subsidy rationalization, or what we term as penyasaran subsidi, is critical. Because through that, then you pass on. But still, the fundamental issue to my mind is still governance. You reduce subsidy, you get revenue, and you get leaders amassing wealth, using positions as Prime Minister or Minister of Finance to enrich his families and cronies, then we're back to square one. So whatever policy we embark upon, to me, very fundamental for a country to ensure that there is that focus on the issue of governance. We are, I've taken a very strong stance on this, uncompromising, and there's caused a lot of problems and issues and challenges. But alhamdulillah, for now, government is stable. The first few months is a bit slightly, not turbulent, but slight turmoil, as you say. Now it's very stable. And the commitment of all coalition leaders is to stay the course until the next elections. So we have, inshallah, with good health, 4 years to go. And this is the time to embark on more radical policies and reform of the economy. So this discussion in Simposium is, to my mind, timely. Yes, for greater prosperity for the country, prosperity for all. Which means some issues like FRA, Financial Responsibility Act, has been introduced and passed, and whatever is necessary, it doesn't matter. Of course, it's very difficult. People have announced FRA for years. Nobody wants to do it because actually it's surrendering part of your wealth, your power. You know, you, Minister of Finance, by having FRA means you are being curtailed in some of your latitude, space to work with, and then you transgress what you promised. You're answerable to the Parliament for public debate. But I think we should be transparent. We should face the music. That's the system. And that would hopefully, because of the clarity of policies, first, political stability. Second, clarity of policies. So we have the economic madani, we have economic energy transition plan, we have the industrial master plan, and we have even the recent midterm review of the 12th Malaysia plan, which is not just an ordinary review, but some major adjustments are being made. But what is, to my mind, uncompromising is the policy to, other than growth and economic issues, but to really show enough compassion and help the poor. A lot of rhetoric in this regard, and a lot has been done. But again, even for the poor, the leakages is unbelievable. Diesel subsidy is an example. You look at the budget speech, I was giving example, for example, we had diesel subsidy, right? Then prior to COVID, a certain amount, I can't recall rightly. Then after COVID, the requirement for diesel shot up. But the actual need in terms of the increased number of public vehicles requiring diesel has not increased that far, which means billions are lost through leakages, that is selling offshore or through the border smuggling. But the rationale is helping the poor. Now, if we can save a few billion in every single direction, I don't know, we estimated initially to get at least 6 billion this year and probably 15 billion reduction next year. Then we should really look at the whole idea of what to tax or not to tax. That's why I said in our discourse or deliberations, that comes second. The academics, economists, and politicians and parliamentarians should focus on the issue of governance, that the government must be clear, determined to stop the excesses. And I think if the excesses being stopped, the wastage, we can save billions. We have this annual Auditor General's report. And you'd be surprised, from the time I was finance minister the first time around till now, we still have the same sort of a criticism. A clock that costs 400 ringgit may cost 4,000 on record. Okay? And these issues you can address, I believe, will be in the right course. There's a greater awareness, and universities can take the lead in continuing this public discourse. And I humbly would submit that I stand to be corrected. I don't have all the perfect answers. I'll make adjustments along the way, as long as you don't adjust corruption and abuse of power. Otherwise, I'm very confident, looking at the attention that we have from the investors in the last few months. It's phenomenal. The German Infineon, for example, when they decided to invest, the largest single investment expansion outside Germany, 5 billion euros. They had 4 choices: attractive incentive by other countries, but he decided Malaysia. But I was particularly interested in this because it is now the front end of the microchip. It's no longer the back end. So Malaysia has come not only the capacity or ability to attract investments, but attract investments at the higher plane of the front end. It's 5 billion euros. Similarly with Geely. I'm on medical leave, but if the prime ministers don't have to take the leave, unlike Zarina. Now, Geely, we are familiar with some of the Chinese investments. There were criticisms in the past, but this time around, they have embarked on huge investments, the latest state-of-the-art in the automotive industry, with Center of Excellence in the university. And we make these conditions and impose these conditions, unlike just like production house. The latest discussion with BlackBerry on the cybersecurity conditions. Either you have a Center of Excellence here or no talk. So I think in the scheme of things, to proceed and propel the country, if you talk about prosperity, of course, you need economic growth and investments. Therefore, our aggressive stance insofar as attracting foreign direct investments is still critical. But then we have to be more selective. We must make sure that our people are trained. With Elon Musk, with Geely, with Infineon, with with BlackBerry, what is the assessment of our capacity, our professionals? And I must thank the university leadership because they have done reasonably well. Without exception, all of them say, no, you have good professionals. We are happy with your engineers. We're happy your IT graduates. I said, is that all? Well, there's something lacking. The niche, the final end is not there. So I think we must take that criticism. Okay? I'm not exaggerating, no exception. Every one of them I talked to did give positive reviews of our graduates in all fields and disciplines. But without exception, even my discussion recently at the Sheikh Zayed Artificial Intelligence University in Abu Dhabi, without exception, they say that what we lack is that niche that need to be given for the input. I've discussed this with the Minister of Higher Education, and we will, try and secure more funds to fit this end. So the Faculty of Artificial Intelligence that we just set up, or we intend to set up in UTM, for example, we just by University of Malaya, I will give priority, of course. I'm from there. So I wanted to give University of Malaya, but they say Prime Minister should not be biased. So we start with UTM. That was my suggestion, by the way, because I thought that we must at least initiate it. We can start with the university, but I think with the faculty, and probably some other universities must start either departments or faculties. It's an example because all of them in their assessment told me directly that you have this sort of graduate with such discipline which is unrivaled in most countries that they have. And I'm very proud of that fact. But we need to give that additional input, which means there's maybe synergy between the university and the private sector. So sekali lagi terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Yang Amat Berhormat Prime Minister of Malaysia, Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim, for the informative and inspiring address. To officially launch the symposium, we would like to invite Yang Berhormat Datuk Armizan and Yang Berbahagia Tan Sri Zarina to join our Prime Minister on the stage. Please place your hand on the globe on my count. 3, 2, 1. A round of applause, everyone. With this, the symposium has been officiated. Once again, we would like to extend our sincere appreciation to Yang Amat Berhormat Datuk Seri Anwar, the Prime Minister of Malaysia, for gracing us with his presence during this momentous occasion today. We are grateful for his attention and consideration to the symposium in its efforts to chart a more prosperous course for Malaysia. Yang Amat Berhormat Datuk Seri Anwar will now make his way out of the hall. To our other esteemed guests, kindly remain where you are as we will commence with our next session shortly.
Peradaban kita bangunkan, bina kota, bina insan, dari budi jadi budaya, bina asas kemampanan, kesejahteraan masa depan.
Tas. Perkembangan terakhir atau terkini mengenai serangan Israel itu agak keterlaluan. saya juga turut mengulangi beberapa kenyataan yang telah dibuat dan juga mendukung beberapa kenyataan setengah pimpinan negara luar yang menyatakan kesal dan mengecam pengeboman hospital di Gaza. Apapun dituduh siapapun, maknanya ini kesan dari serangan dan perang. Sebab itu kita kata sebaiknya hentikan. Ini masa untuk kita redakan keadaan dan hentikan. Kalau teruskan, ini mangsanya wanita, anak-anak, pesakit. Ini sudah sampai ke tahap gila dan hilang peri kemanusiaan. Dan yang paling dikesalkan ialah negara barat yang bercakap soal hak kemanusiaan. Ini rupanya ada kategori. Ada manusia kelas 1, ada manusia kelas hamba. Dan ini yang kita bantah sekeras-kerasnya. Tapi sekarang ya ada tuduhan pelbagai. Saya tak kira. Pokoknya hentikan kegiatan ini. Esok saya akan ke Riyadh dan selepas GCC ASEAN, Perdana Menteri Muhammad bin Salman minta saya hadir untuk lawatan sehari untuk berbincang. Dan saya akan fikir keperluan kita bincang dengan beberapa pimpinan sama ada saya harus jelajah ke beberapa negeri ataupun melalui telefon saja.
Seri, apa status peacekeeping mission kita di Lebanon susulan skirmishes dekat dan letupan di base Unifil di sana?
Dia keputusan untuk mengekalkan pasukan keamanan itu adalah keputusan yang bersama dibuat termasuk PBB dan kalau keadaan keselamatan dapat terjamin itu dapat kita teruskan, kalau tidak akan kita bawa pulang. Okey, terima kasih.
Jadi komen pasal di Parlimen Kuala Kangsar menyokong pemimpanan Datuk Seri.
Ya, saya belum menghubungi dia telefon atau berjumpa, tapi lihat kepada kenyataan dia, saya ucap terima kasih. Dia memberi sokongan soal dia nak kekal dengan PN itu soal keputusan dia. Tapi saya fikir kalau orang lihat umpamanya apa yang kita cuba lakukan dan dasar ekonomi dan merakyatkan, jadi sepatutnya dia bagi satu dukungan yang baik.
Dakwaan Ketua Bangkang bahawa dia diubut untuk menyokong Datuk Seri itu?
Dia kalau dia ada bukti dia kena bawa. Tapi apa lagi dia nak kata? Yang saya tahu, saya belum jumpa, saya belum ada kontak, saya tak hantar wakil. Saya tahu siapa yang ubut. Dia kalau ada bukti, dia kata keluarkan. Jangan pakai bebal saja. Dan kalau ada, ini satu tuduhan yang serius. Dia patut bawa laporan dan biar ada siasatan. Baik.
Datuk Seri, bila rombakan kabinet?
Rombak kabinet? Kena rombak.
Untuk mengisi kekosongan pengganti?
Bila ada calon? Okay.
Dah ada calon ke Datuk Seri? Dah ada calon ke?
Saya tanya.